A lot of people are aware of IoT. It's being used widely in contact tracing, but how do you go about making sure your IoT programs are secure? Again, at our July Microsoft program on July 16th, we're going to hear about architecting IoT applications. This is critically important. It's all about securing them. Let me turn it over to our great trio of Microsoft experts, all yours.
Thank you for the great intro. So everybody, I'm excited to be able to give you some insight into our world over in Microsoft as we're looking at IoT. It's an ever-evolving risk that's out there. And so being on the security team, this is a great way that we can make sure that Microsoft is safe, but we also can give some options on how you all can keep your company safe as well. So I know that we've had some of the zero trust that was presented earlier, and they gave a good high level of that network segmentation for the devices specific, and we're going to get to give you a little bit more insight on that. So I want to start us off with just some brief intros so you know whom you're going to be hearing from today. My name is Lindsay Raffel. I've been with Microsoft about 6 years. I'm a senior security program manager over in the digital security risk engineering team. Devank?
And my name is Devank. I am peer to Lindsay, and I'm a security architect here, and my role has been on this project specifically on the architecture piece as well as the strategy piece when it comes to bringing this program together here at Microsoft.
Yep, and I am Ryan Berry. I'm a principal cloud solution architect, so I help customers like yourselves implement some of the security best practices when it comes to both applications as well as IoT platforms or implementations that they might be embarking upon.
Perfect. So I just want to give you a brief overhaul of the agenda that we're going to cover today so you know a little bit on the details. IoT, what is IoT? A lot of us have some familiarity of what IoT is on a very high level, but there's some surprising features to it. And so Devank's going to help us walk through that process to give you specifics, things that might surprise you. We're going to also dive into some of those risks and what it looks like in the Microsoft world. We have an IoT security lifecycle. So how are we responding to those risks? Ryan's going to finish us off with some wonderful examples and solutions with Azure IoT. And so that will give you kind of an insight on how you might be able to utilize what you learned today in your world as well. So Devank, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure. So the first slide we have here is about definitions, and I think it is very important in the world of IoT to define and scope, and with multiple teams working here internally, the network teams, the assessment teams, the asset management, digital transformation, facilities team, and user experience. I think it's very important to bring this program together to agree upon some of the scoping and fundamentals. So everybody in the industry would come up with a definition. This is our definition, and I think we're trying to keep this very simple from a standpoint of generate business productivity is the theme. And while we are on the IoT, to scope it for our immediate work, we also define high-risk IoT, and that pretty much talks about the legacy component that already exists in the environment, which is not yet modernized. And again, those are some bullet point items that makes it legacy or makes it high risk. When it comes to weaker authentication, encryption protocols, dependencies on the COPNET infrastructure. So that's pretty much all about definition. I will quickly move on to the next slide, which again differentiates between the legacy IoT and modern. And it is for us very important here at Microsoft to differentiate, because one of our bigger security controls, which is network segmentation, which Lindsay is going to take a deeper dive on, is based on this differentiation where we have buckets or categories from a segmentation standpoint on legacy and then on modern. And modern is pretty much internet facing, outbound connectivity, modern protocols, modern management through internet, as you heard in the zero trust presentation from Darshana and peers. And legacy is pretty much that exists today. While we have it in production, we may retire it in the future, but we are dealing with it. So how do we secure it and bring it to that level of controls so that the security is applied to it? So moving on, I'm trying to rush through some of these slides because there's a lot of content. And this particular slide, I'm not going to speak on that, but these are some of the common IoT risk, and people can relate to it in the enterprise. We are no different. we face the same risk, and some of them have more priority than others, but this is an effort to list all of them over here while we are driving and designing this program. We do focus on these, and that's what drive our program further. Moving on, as I was mentioning about the definition and between the teams and the work we need to carry on, it is very important to categorize what we are going to focus as an enterprise here at Microsoft. And even though in industry there are so many different categorization, it can be retail, healthcare, energy. Our categorization is very simple, where we're trying to just say there is consumer IoT, there is industrial IoT, and our focus is enterprise IoT. And that's what we're going to focus on, and that's where our distribution is in the categories. Now, within enterprise IoT, there is again a distribution, and this is again to keep the design very simple, where we have thousands of device types, and then there will be millions of devices out there. So we have broken that into these three subcategories: business productivity, life safety and security, and building management. And the whole focus is that business productivity is something that brings productivity to the info workers and business to be more productive. Life safety and security is all about securing the environment, and putting like devices in that category, be it batch feeders, facial recognition. And building management is also driving efficiencies in energies and power, and how to make the buildings smart buildings. So we are still figuring out if there's a need for another category, but for all the devices so far, we are able to fit in here. And again, we can go crazy with 20, 30 categories, but the whole idea is to scale with our network infrastructure and keep it as simple as we can. And this is one of the most important slides here, which describes our program, our strategy moving forward, and all the life cycle, basically. So we definitely have a lot of governance going on, where we have security policies on the strategy. We have guidelines, and specifically catering to our requirements for IoT at Microsoft. And once those were created, and this is an ongoing process, these are the pillars basically, and I'm going to very briefly touch on these pillars and then hand it over to Lindsay to go in some of the details of some of them basically. So the first one is all about designing those business scenarios, and there's a team out there at Microsoft that just goes after creating those opportunities or problems which IoT is going to solve, and just putting them on a paper, making those business cases. And then working with the partners and OEMs out there to either find a product or create a product that fits our need. And along with that is the link to our pre-purchase assessment, where there's a team out there, or multiple teams basically, that work on this, where the whole idea is to do assessment on these devices once they are identified, and match them up with our governance processes, our guidelines, and even before the purchase happens, we want to make sure that they are in line from a support, from a security, from life cycle standpoint. So that work happens over here with this team. Then the device gets procured by the business owners or the device owners. After that, there is another in-depth security review, which looks into domains like authentication, encryption, risk management, threat modeling, where will the device get placed in our network, data flow of those devices, how they're talking, where they're talking, and privacy and data handling. So that team just specifically focuses on that, and does its due diligence to give a green light to the business to host the device in the network. And then comes the registration, which is very important for us, and it goes into our CMDB, and every single device has an association with the attributes that gets registered. So, from a tracking, monitoring, and incident response purposes. This particular one is really important for us, network registration, and Lindsay is going to take a deeper dive. And we also have an animation that shows how we are simplifying and automating things to move the already existing legacy device and also put the newer modern world devices into its own segment. We're calling it facility segment, accessed by Darshana and peers in the Zero Trust. And again, this falls under the Zero Trust umbrella, where we are aligning, and Lindsay is going to talk in detail, and then the graphic will follow how dynamic VLAN switching happens to put those devices. We're trying to automate it to give the onus to the end users or the ones who were going to register their device in the network, and then place them, and all of a sudden the magic happens. The policies gets applied through our network access policy engine, and the device comes to life. And then there is device management, which is all about device hygiene, and we have our own security principles. We are trying to match them in the IoT world, where the devices will get managed from configuration to patching to updates to even at the time of the troubleshooting. So all those things needs to get followed. And then there is monitoring and incident management. We have a dedicated team that focuses on the IoT piece and have developed or are working also on developing defenses specifically from a standpoint of how are we going to work on this discovery, and what are the different scenarios that will be covered under IoT monitoring and incident management. And the last one is on the device retirement. So we are also coming up with the guidelines on how they're going to get off of a network and the cleanup that will happen. So with that, Lindsay, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you to take a deeper dive.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen up and running so you guys can see that. All right, wonderful. I hope you all can see that message if you cannot. So, Demond, thank you for giving a good high level and a step-by-step through this overall life cycle. I do want to grab a little bit of time to dive deeper into some of these stages, if you will. To give you kind of a good perspective of what we are doing on the Microsoft side. So I want to start with the device assessment and inventory. Now, a lot of us feel pretty confident of what we have on our network and just a little bit of description of those device types, but you can have some surprises. So that can actually go a lot further than your typical security cameras, conference rooms, printers, and such. Can actually dive deeper into where you have coffee machines and different things like that. There was even a casino that got hacked by a fish tank. So there's a lot of surprises, and we want to make sure on the Microsoft side that we're documenting those devices. We have a single source inventory, so everybody's putting it in one location, and we're making sure that we're getting that necessary information. So we obviously want to know what those types are. We need to know who owns those devices so we can respond if there's anything that comes up as a great risk, and where those are located so we can see if there's other impacting worlds around it. Now we have what Devon gave us a good breakdown on is what is our assessment process for new devices. So we have now got a great IoT lifecycle set up within our world, some standards and requirements. How do we make sure that those new devices are abiding by those? So the pre-purchase is where we dive into it deeper than just, hey, we're going to buy this, we know what it does. We want to do on the Microsoft side, we want to look how it functions, of course, but we got to dive deeper into even the hardware. So we're looking at both the devices themselves and the vendor. Are they able to meet our security standards and requirements? Because there can be surprises that even they are not aware of. And so we are working down into the nitty-gritty to get that fully assessed. Obviously, that gives us the confidence. We can go ahead and procure those devices. But now that we have them and we know it's feasible how they're going to be performing and that they can abide by our security standards, do we have it set up to do that? So we want to make sure that we go into our security design review so we are being certain that those are going to perform in the way that we approve them to do that. So going into the network registration, this is where we want to give you a good aspect of an example of how this can be implemented in your world as well. We need to make sure that we're aware of where those devices are connecting. We need to keep as least privileged access as we can. We don't want to give administrative privileges to the wrong folks. We want to make sure our critical resources are safe and secure in their own world, and only when it's absolutely necessary does a device get access to that information. Devon's going to go and show us an animation on what that segmentation can look like and how we are working on that on the Microsoft side. And I want to take a little bit of a screenshot to show you some of the ways that we authenticate that information before those devices even get access to anything. So at Microsoft, we have a portal for device registration. So we've gone through the assessment. We know what those devices are, but we're not going to let you connect to our network until we know that you're what we checked. And so we have this portal. It's automated, so make it as easy as possible so there's less human error that can occur. And this gives us that ability to say, okay, this has been approved with the proper access to be connected to this segment. So this is where we have our corporate network in its security, and then we have those IoT network segments that keep them in their own world, and we want to make sure that we know what's going to be placed within that. Nothing can connect without it being authenticated by our team. So Devank, I'm going to have you go over this animation as it plays out.
Yeah, let me see if I can match the speed, or I can probably take a time to talk about it. But this is pretty much the corporate network with some firewalls that we're trying to show over here as a typical enterprise network would look like, with all the users, computers, and IoT devices sitting on that network and talking to each other. We want to change that. So then we have this registration portal Lindsay touched on. Users register their devices, and then we created these IoT networks, both legacy and modern, with our buckets. We're trying to show over here in this animation. And then we're going to move with that dynamic VLAN switching, where user register and move the devices, magic happens, they start showing up in their segments for legacy and modern. And also we're trying to show in this next one is that modern talk directly to the internet, gets managed over there, while legacy still have some flows and dependency on the COPNET. And on top of that, the NAC engine pushes those policies depending on where these devices needs to go and what the flow is. I'm done.
I know this is all pretty rapid, and a lot of us, it's wonderful to be able to give you all this information, but thank you so much, Ron, that he's going to be providing. Obviously, there's the recording, and we're going to make sure that this PowerPoint is available. We have some additional notes within it, so you guys can take a look at this with a little bit more relaxed time. Thank you, Devank.
Sure.
So I just want to go into just a couple more stages to dive into these. We have our device management. Now, we have everything up and running. Yay, check the box. We are good to go. Well, it doesn't stop there. Everything has this living, breathing vulnerabilities and risks that are out there. Everything gets more complex. Unfortunately, security has to as well, because those malicious actors, they're very smart and they can surprise you. So we need to make sure that we're managing those devices. So this is where we're making sure we do that device hardening. We're looking at any vulnerabilities of where we've seen similar things happening to those devices out there in the world, and how we can address them. Any kind of passwords or firmware that need to be updated and become more secure. We're going to go a little bit into the intrusion detection and monitoring as well, but you can see this is just a small aspect of what that is. It's wonderful because we're going to have Ryan give some information on how you can have examples of what is available in Microsoft and what needs to be the solutions that are out there. All right, and the last phase that I want to go through is that monitoring and incident response. Obviously, those devices are out there. We are wanting to make sure we keep our critical resources as secure as possible. And we've now made the secure environment. We know what's out there. We're keeping up to date on those devices. But what else is happening outside of those devices? Are there new devices that are popping up that we didn't know about? Are there administrators that are giving access to those devices that it shouldn't give? But we want to make sure that that is flowing, so those devices are doing and performing as they should and not expanding past that. So we, on Microsoft's side, we have a monitoring team and an incident response team that are both looking at to detect any of these situations that might occur, so we can prevent any risks, any new risks as they're happening. And I wanted to provide one example of something that Microsoft encountered last year. So we had a third party that used a video decoder device, and what they unfortunately did is they had a default credentials on that. And obviously that's very easy for a hacker to break into. And unfortunately that gives a door, it's a gateway to put our information at risk. Luckily, we have that monitoring and incident response teams that were able to step in and stop it to keep our corporate networks safe. But it is something that we know we need to keep checking. We need to look and manage those devices to make sure that those vulnerabilities do not exist there, and that we restrict those devices so they don't get the access that those hackers are trying to get. So this is just a good example. Again, you'll get access to this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to read through this a little bit more since I'm doing it as a high level. But just gives you a perspective that Microsoft, we're not out of this either. We're sitting in the same challenges that you are. So Devanka, I'm just going to let you finish off with some of the program challenges that even Microsoft is facing.
Sure. So before we hand it over to Ryan, these are the challenges an enterprise faces, and we are no different. We are dealing with this. Some have very good head start, and some we are still coming up with some good story to cater to these. And standardization, isolated processes, multiple teams working in the size of our organization, how to bring them together. There can always be infrastructure challenges because we're all over the globe, and we need to migrate some of those legacy devices, bring out modern world devices in the infrastructure. There's shadow IT and device discovery issues, and there are integration to our first party tooling as well as the solutions that Ryan is going to touch on. We are working on that. There's a device management story which we want to stamp and bring it to the level where we feel comfortable with our standards. And then authentication is plays a big role in the IoT world. And with all those legacy devices out there, we're trying to figure out what our story is going to be. And we're getting a good start with our first party. But again, handing this over to Ryan, who's going to pick it up from here and talk about the Azure solutions out there. Right.
Yeah, thank you. Let me flip over. All right, so we talked about how we at Microsoft have addressed some of these concerns and challenges that are common when it comes to attaching IoT devices to your network. How can you, as a customer, make use of some tools and technologies to be able to help you with your journey to leveraging IoT capabilities? So within Azure, our cloud platform, we have a lot of capabilities that we've kind of started off with on the starting on the right-hand side with our cloud native features. We have a number of services, including IoT Hub, Azure Security Center, and Azure Sentinel, but as well as some device-specific scenarios with regards to Azure Sphere and IoT Edge. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how those capabilities can be used or leveraged to deploy powerful compute capabilities at the edge or in the field in a secure manner. So thinking about that, I know we mentioned the industrial IoT, but this extends well beyond the industrial space, even in the consumer space, or things like coffee makers that might be in your break room, refrigerators that might have some automated diagnostics capabilities inside of them. And when you start kind of thinking about the explosion of these connected devices, it becomes ever more important to think about how when you deploy these devices, you can protect your digital assets on your network, data that resides in your network. And then if you're a customer that's actually thinking about building one of these smart devices, how can you build on top of a secure platform to be able to extend some security capabilities to consumers or customers that are using your products that you're manufacturing? So one of the ways that we at Microsoft have addressed this is by establishing a specification for something we call Azure Sphere. And this is an MCU, which is a microprocessor controller that has a number of core capabilities embedded on the die that are designed to firewall off different components from one another. So when you have software running on that, you can protect that asset digitally. And when you think about that, as soon as you manufacture a widget that might have some sort of connectivity or capabilities to connect to the cloud or to the internet, that device is out of your control, and you don't know what a malicious or potentially malicious or bad actor could do to that device if they had physical access to it. So including things like being able to inspect that device and try to maybe deploy their own firmware on it to be able to do bad things on your network or to be able to do bad things with your service. So Azure Sphere was designed from the ground up as a vehicle that you can build on top of to be able to have very strict control over what you allow that firmware running on that device to do. And if somebody were to have physical access to that device, we have very strict policies that you can control over what that software can do. So yes, if somebody was able to flash it with some malicious firmware, it can, for instance, maybe only talk to the Azure IoT hub endpoint in the cloud. And as soon as it does, it's going to recognize that the checksum is different than what was originally deployed on that device, and it will the cloud will immediately deploy the version of software that's supposed to be on that device. So we have some inbuilt protections to limit the exposure, and also be able to slam back on the software that's supposed to be on there. And some additional capabilities that we've extended to this is this layered approach to security that we actually have at the silicon level, some security and some boundaries established around the microprocessor at the, like I said, at the silicon level, in addition to providing some additional layers of security at the operating system level that customers and bad actors don't have access to, that we kind of cordoned off what that software that you do deploy to that device actually has the ability to do. So this is a really powerful capability that you can build on top of to be able to have a firm grounding that your device that you're manufacturing is secure. So when you think about so that's the connected device scenario, where you actually have a product that you're manufacturing that you want to embed some capabilities into. We also have in Azure something called Azure IoT Edge, where you can actually move capabilities of the cloud into your manufacturing plant or onto industrial vehicles or oil rigs that you might be running and operating within your business. So it's a powerful capability that we have within Azure. But how do we help protect those assets again once they leave the four walls of your building when you deploy those, or when you build that device or that product using the Edge device? I'm just going to go ahead and let this build out. So we have, as part of our IoT Edge platform, a number of layers, again, much like the hardware-based version with Azure Sphere. We have a software-based layered approach to being able to protect the data and your application running on that device. When you think about it, over on the left-hand side, if you deployed your application onto some low-powered compute device, say a Raspberry Pi as an example, and it might use a certificate to authenticate to the cloud. If somebody were to liberate that device or to steal that device, have physical access to that device, they now have the ability to obtain a certificate stored in the file system that allows them then to authenticate to the cloud as that device, or mimicking that device. So we have some capabilities that we've layered into our IoT Edge platform to be able to help solve that problem. And specifically, jumping all the way over to the right-hand side, just for the sake of time, we have this secure enclave that works in tandem or in conjunction with the TPM that would be on a device that you might be deploying in one of these environments. And the idea is that the authentication mechanism that's used by the device to connect to the cloud is secured and locked down and inaccessible by a potential bad actor that might have physical access to that device. So the benefit there is that, while there might be software that somebody who has physical access to the device could potentially, take or try to introspect, the actual, the physical possession of the device doesn't warrant them the ability to build a malicious device that can actually mimic something that you've deployed in the field. So, the point of this is that whether you're building a device, a coffee maker or smart refrigerator, or a device with an embedded microprocessor, or using some of our IoT Edge capabilities, we have this layered approach to security that you can rely upon and engineer into your device and not have to worry about some of the security aspects of your solution. And one of the ways that we extend this further is if you think about a manufacturing situation where you're building vehicles or you're building a smart refrigerator, and you have a you have a reliance on a supplier to maybe build a subassembly for that component that has some intelligence embedded into it. So as an example, let's say in your smart refrigerator you have a downstream supplier that actually manufactures a circuit board that has maybe an Azure Sphere device that allows that refrigerator to connect to the cloud. So how can you be assured that when that circuit board leaves your supplier's warehouse or manufacturing plant on its way to you to be able to install in a refrigerator that it's not interfered or tampered with? So we have this certificate signing attestation that we employ with our Azure IoT stack to be able to allow you to have the device attest that it wasn't tampered with along the way. So as an example, you might have a supplier manufacture circuit board with an Azure Sphere and maybe send it to another company to put some software on it, maybe some firmware on it, and then ultimately send it on to you to embed in your refrigerator. So if you think about that chain of custody, there's a lot of points along the way where bad things can be introduced to potentially turn into another botnet situation like that was referred to earlier. So Azure has some capabilities using the IoT Edge framework and IoT Hub to be able to validate the certificate authenticity across all those different layers and different suppliers you might be working with. So when you think about so that covers some of the capabilities in Azure that you can leverage in your own IoT solutions. When you think about that in the context of monitoring what you've deployed, there's some staggering and alarming statistics that 35% of companies said that the primary source of data breaches were IoT devices. There was mention of the fish tank at a casino that allowed attackers to have access to the network in a casino and steal information about the high rollers. That is obviously very important to that particular casino. So how can you protect yourself and monitor proactively to devices you have deployed out into the field? We make that possible through something we have called Azure Security Center for IoT. Azure Security Center is a capability we have in Azure that's been around a while, and we've extended that to be able to encompass some of the IoT platform that we have available that you can build on top of in Azure. And specifically what this provides you is not only a single pane of glass for security hygiene across your enterprise, but also the visibility and lens to be able to see what's going on with devices that you have deployed within your organization. So just to give you some examples of what that looks like, when you have a Azure Sphere device or an Azure IoT Edge device that is being monitored by Azure Security Center for IoT, you get the problem and challenge with monitoring is understanding what to set up an alert on, and you don't know what you don't know, and often there might be something that you should have been alerted or notified about that you don't get notified about because you just simply didn't set up an alert about that. So Azure Security Center benefits you greatly in this regard because it actually has some AI-based monitoring that establishes some baselines on what's normal from your devices that you have deployed, in addition to looking at vulnerabilities as they emerge from threats that Microsoft identified or some of our partners have identified. So what this example screen is showing, there's a number of devices deployed that have ports that are open or that have firewalls that are open to potentially allowing attack vectors back to those devices. Or maybe the underlying operating system running on a device isn't secure, such as the case with the last item there. And we can take that a step further and actually generate proactive alerts to alert the necessary individuals that they need to take action. And again, this goes back to my earlier comment that if you don't have those alerts set up in whatever monitoring service you might be using today, you're not going to get alerted or notified on those situations or conditions. Azure Security Center will actually proactively alert you on things that it deems extremely important that you should take action on, such as somebody potentially and successfully logging in remotely to a device, or attempting a brute force attack against a device, or installing some bit of software that actually is doing crypto coin mining. So with that, we're right at the top of the hour, so we'll turn it over to just any questions or answers. I know it's a lot of information to digest, so hopefully it gives you a complete story on what we at Microsoft do to be able to protect devices attached to our network, and what you can do as a customer using our cloud platform and capabilities of Azure to be able to build secure platforms or devices or solutions using devices, and also be able to monitor those devices once they're deployed.